Hello, my name is Kia Walsh, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of Sherwood Autism Center, Kansas City's pioneering organization dedicated to empowering and equipping autistic individuals with the tools, education, and opportunities to thrive. Today, I'm so honored to speak with Camille Proctor, the founder and executive director of the Color of Autism Foundation. Camille is a passionate advocate, public speaker, researcher, and mother whose work is driving meaningful change. Thank you, Camille, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're going to jump into some questions and we'll see where it takes us. Camille, can you share a little bit about your journey and what has inspired you to create the Color of Autism Foundation?
Absolutely. In 2008, right as my son was approaching 2, I noticed there were some things he wasn't doing. He wasn't pointing and he wasn't speaking in gibberish. And I found that very odd. I'm like, most babies speak in gibberish. And he wasn't walking. He didn't walk until I think he was about 17 months. Um, but people kept telling me boys are slow. You're being, irrational, whatever. Fine. I knew something was wrong. And so I fought to get him a diagnosis. And one of the reasons why it was so difficult was because he was, I think, a Black child who was very engaging because he
Mhm.
made a lot of eye contact, but he only made eye contact with women. And so no one noticed that the people that he would engage with were all women. No one noticed that the people that I now know were sensory seeking were women.
Mhm.
So I got him the diagnosis that I knew he needed, but then I didn't have a community.
Wow.
So I would go to support groups and I'd talk about things. And at the time, Michael Brown had just been killed. And
Okay.
I remember saying to these groups of most all white women, and I'd just be there and I'd say, well, what's going to happen when my son's, um, older? I think, or maybe it was Trayvon Martin. I can't even remember, but I remember saying to them that Black kids are always perceived as being older than they are. And
Right.
if my son doesn't understand how to yield, he would get hurt if I was lucky or possibly killed.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I was invited out of those groups.
Write it out. Encouraged to depart.
Encouraged to depart because I was too gloomy for them.
Right.
So, and they didn't understand that this is what, as a Black mother, they didn't understand giving birth to a Black son is a huge responsibility. They didn't understand that responsibility. And so I started my own group. It wasn't as if I had all the answers. I just wanted to be in control of my destiny and what my community needed, because I also noticed that my community wasn't following suit in regards to early intervention, and getting their kids the diagnosis that they deserved, as opposed to being bad.
Right. And, that sort of lends itself to, the commitment that the Color of Autism Foundation has in terms of celebrating and uplifting autistic individuals in our community. On top of what you noticed upon diagnosis, why is this focus so important in terms of fostering understanding and inclusion across the lifespan?
So, you know, it's really important for people to love themselves. And the only way that a person can love themselves is if the people that brought them into this world follow suit, or the people who are their extended family or adopted family. Families aren't always inclusive and they don't even think
Mm.
about that, right? And
Right.
so they should really be inclusive of their individuals in their family. And a child learns self-esteem from their family. And I think that family should be their child's biggest cheerleader so that that child can grow up and cheer for themselves and advocate for themselves. It starts when they're really young. And so we try and teach parents that you have to come to grips with this is an autistic person. They learn differently. If they're flapping, if they're flapping happy, let it be. If they're
Hmm.
hurting themselves, then you want to figure out something to replace that behavior. We talk about that stuff. We teach parents how to be data collectors, right? To be responsive to when and why, you know? And we try to discourage ableism. I mean, I said try because it's really hard, because what a lot of advocates don't understand, a lot of self advocates don't understand, but they're starting to understand, is that being a parent is ableist in itself. So whether you have
Amen.
You're always, ooh, ooh, did you fall? Ooh, ooh.
Right. Your
And so
job is to make
they
sure,
don't
right?
understand. But now that so many of my friends who are autistic are becoming parents, they understand. They understand. They overstand now.
Yes.
So yeah.
So, keeping in line with that, what insights or encouragement do you share with other Black parents raising autistic children?
Well, first of all, we have to get over the stigma of your child again being autistic,
Hmm.
and you have to stand in it, just like you stand in your Blackness. Um, and the reason being is that we have to be able, and your child has to be able to properly advocate for themselves. And, I always use this analogy of why it's so important. And again, I hate to do these comparisons, but you look at situations where there's someone that commits a crime. If they're a non-Black person, they are autistic or they have some sort of behavioral issue, right? You go in a South Carolina church, you shoot up parishioners at a South Carolina church. You get to go to Burger King and then they tell you you're autistic, right?
Yes.
You're a young man who's walking down the street in a zip up hoodie with a can of Arizona punch. You're not
Skittles.
only are you not autistic, they allow you to die in a squad car
Right.
or neurodivergent, or you know what I mean? So we have to be able to advocate for ourselves, and we have to let people know that these are our children. They are autistic, and we have to live in who we are as a people. And I think that that's one of the biggest hurdles, is just getting people to come to grips with who they are, because no one's ever taught them who they were.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes. And expounding on that, you spoke to it a little earlier, but representation shapes perspectives. In essence, you can't be what you don't see, right? We hear that often. In terms of your work, how are you helping to shape how Hollywood and the media portray autism in an authentic and affirming way?
Well, I know I've consulted on a few projects, and I know that when I talk to them, I said you can't. They have this, I call it a template. It's the
Mhm.
kid that ticks, ticks, ticks. It's the peculiar odd person. It's always something, but it's never a lot of the people that I see and a lot of the people that I know. And I say, the best representation is to first of all recruit those who have lived experience, who are actually autistic, and utilize them as your actors. And I know quite a few autistic actors now, um, and they're getting booked and they're getting work, and I'm glad for that. And just recently, I don't know this young man, but there's a non-speaking young man that's going to be on a PBS cartoon with his AAC voice.
What?
Yes.
That's wonderful.
And so, those are the types of things I encourage, because I can't really explain what autism is. And they get so frustrated with me, these producers. We're in these talks and it's like, well, give us, I can't give you anything because autism isn't linear.
Right? It's not one thing,
It's not one thing, it's a bunch of things.
right? And it
It's
looks different in different people.
absolutely. So, I just ask that you don't put a character out there that's like tick, tick and picking at it. Don't do that, because
Right.
I think that we've seen that for too long. I mean, Rain Man was 35 years ago, and they're still using that as what an
The
autistic
template.
person is, right?
How do we start at sort of a micro level, right? In terms of community members in your city or local offices that don't have a personal experience like that you and I may have with autism, and understanding that it is diverse within being diverse, correct? So how do we contribute to a more inclusive, supportive environment for Black autistic individuals in the ways that you've mentioned? How do we see ourselves? How do we promote board, for example? I'm seeking folks with autism to be board representatives. We have autistic individuals here who are teachers at Sherwood and also in leadership. What are other ways that we can create a more inclusive community so people don't even, so they don't only associate autism with that tick, 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 or the hand flapping? Autism can look like a lot of different things. How do we create more exposure and opportunity there?
Well, I think you're starting it, and I know we certainly try and do it. Many of our facilitators are actually autistic,
Hmm.
and when I have them facilitate different things in the community, I always get, Miss Camille, you sure they autistic?
Right.
And I said, what did she just say? You know, I have an autistic facilitator who's a highly decorated military veteran who has
Hmm.
2 children on the spectrum, and she teaches our positive discipline class, where she teaches families how to positively discipline their child. We have another facilitator that designs the New York City inclusion classrooms, and she's a librarian and accomplished author, should I say. Let me clear that up. So I think that is, well, you know, when you're an artist, you have to give the right monikers. But the point is, I think that it's important to be inclusive. And I didn't pause there because one of our programs that we are starting, we're in pre-launch now, where we're going to have is a community crisis intervention program. And so we're training families with the first responders, not vice versa, not give the cops some donuts and then tell them some random stuff about autistic people,
On a
having
PowerPoint.
them work with the families so that they can understand the behaviors. We trialed this during COVID, and it actually worked really well because the officers felt like they got to know the individuals that were in these. We had like a little group, and the officers would come in and they would work with the kids on projects and stuff. And they really enjoyed it because they got a bird's eye view of individuals. And so
It's
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, I think it just falls in line with adult education. So we learn better in action. And so that really is groundbreaking, and something I would love to, maybe talk offline about is the training of law enforcement, the training of teachers in terms of having real life scenarios, not case studies that fall flat on a piece of paper. How do you meet someone who is autistic so it shapes your paradigm, right? So you have a shift from thinking it's just tick, tick, tick to it could be Pharrell Williams, right? Um, right? It could
It could be, but you know
it
what's
is.
interesting? What's interesting is that we had this cop. He was, first of all, he was so funny to me. Because I talk about him all the time, and he's seen stuff, a video. I know, Miss Camille, I know you're talking about me because he's from the South, and he was white, and he kept saying, "I really want to be part of this, but you know I'm white." I said, "Fine, I don't care. You can come in." So he was in the group, and the kids loved him because he was always asking questions about likes and dislikes and all this other stuff. Anyway, he was out one day and he saw a young man who was looking at the license plate on a car, and he was circling the car, and he said, and the little fella did a little flap. You know the flap, what you call it? I said stemming. Yeah, he was stemming, doing the little thing. And I said, okay, and what happened? He goes, well, I remember that you told a story about your son liking license plates from all the different states.
Mhm.
And that license plate was from Illinois. And so I asked him, I said, do you like license plates? And the little man said, yeah. This back and forth. So the moral of the story was the cop recognized that young man was not a perp. He was no longer a perp. He was an
Right. He was
autistic,
encasing the car.
and he wasn't casing the car. He was an autistic young person who liked vehicles,
Right.
and
Right.
they struck a friendship. And it's such a nice story because what they found out is that the family was unhoused,
Mm.
and this cop and his precinct or sheriff's department, I think it was the sheriff's department, they worked to get the family in housing, got the kid a bike, got the siblings bikes. It ended up being a nice story. So yeah.
Right. It's multi-layered. I think one of the things that we're both getting at is that people are not just one thing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and people are multifaceted, and you should not put people in a box in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I love I love this conversation, and I know that we are a little short on time, but I would love to hear about some of the future work that you're doing with the foundation and some of your strategic goals coming up.
So really, my biggest goal is what I mentioned. We want to take this program of crisis intervention national, because it's important, especially in our underserved communities. It's important for families to be responsive to their loved ones' needs, because these behaviors don't start overnight. And so I think that in our community, we've become accustomed to, when they have a crisis, to dial 911.
Hmm.
And we know what those digits, those 3 digits mean when you dial those 3 digits, but you do it anyway. And
Because
then,
what are your other options?
right, you do it anyway. But that's because you haven't been taught any skills on how to de-escalate in a home.
Right.
And the community isn't responsive to what's needed in your home in regards to supports and care. And it's not even supported to its own community by having crisis intervention people. So that's a really important program that we are looking to launch in the next couple of months. But currently we have parent training where we work with our parents for 5 weeks, do it every quarter. They get 4 opportunities to join our training. And it's 5 weeks where we introduce them to therapeutic interventionalists. We do self-care, but it's all surrounded on getting the parents to understand what these therapeutics are and how to make the therapeutics culturally responsive to their home.
Right.
Like,
Not one size fits all.
correct. It's not a template. And we encourage our parents, again, to be data collectors so they're able to talk about what I like to call the ebb and flow of development. And
Right.
we also have support groups for parents. We have a dads group because dads, for some reason, only want to talk around dads, and that's fine. I'm going to let them all be great. And then we have a regular support group. I call that the regular group because that's where the moms are.
So it's
And um, we just have a whole bunch of programming. If you check our site, the Color of Autism, you'll always see we have some sort of program going on, because I think the biggest thing is information. We don't, there's not enough dissemination of information, and information is what makes us as a culture powerful.
yes.
And
Right.
I think people should stop thinking in terms of, oh, you need a picnic day, you need a autism friendly day. No, you don't need any of that stuff, because to be quite honest with you, it's not autism friendly if you have to get up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. I'm like, do you know autistic people? They like to sleep in. They don't want to get up at 7 o'clock to see whatever. That's number
Right.
one.
There's that thing about being horizontal, right? There are lots of levels that folks just need to understand in their daily lives. And also making it separate and apart, I feel like doesn't normalize. And that is another thing that I sort of have a personal and professional hesitation towards. It's like not making things separate and apart.
It's
Um,
because it's not inclusion by design. You're
right.
separating them. And so people will never get to see somebody. Well, it's funny because my son will not go to any of those sensory friendly things. He said, nope, no more. No, thank you. Because he has the audacity, as loud as he can be, to be offended by somebody else making noise.
Well, yes.
And I just look at him like, for real? Because, like, for an hour, you just said, whoo, for an hour.
Well, that was different.
It was, and it's just like, because we laugh, and that's the other thing. We tell parents it's okay to laugh because sometimes they even know their behavior is ridiculous.
Right.
And
Right.
that's the thing, and they want to be included in all aspects of your family life. If you laugh at each other and you have a good time, include that person, the autistic person. They want to be part of that. You know,
Right.
they really do. My son has a friend, a little girl in his one used to be in his class. She loved being around me, basically because I would say little stuff to him like, Ari, don't be raggedy. And so she
Mhm.
said, what's raggedy?
Right. Right.
And
And
I
now we
told her,
expanded vocabulary.
well, and my daughter was like, Mom, why'd you tell that little white girl about Raggedy? I said, so, and she said, well, who is Raggedy? And I showed the girl a picture of Raggedy Ann and Andy. And she goes, I must be the girl. I said, sure, it's fine.
Sure.
Everybody's a
Sure.
little
Sure.
raggedy, but those are the things that I think that's helpful. Believe it or not, humor is helpful to the community because most of the autistic people I know are the funniest people I know. Not
Humor
because
is
they say
healing.
strange stuff, because they're comedians.
Right, right. Healing humor is healing for sure. I love the idea of pulling families in and parents in. That is something that Sherwood that we are working on right now. We're kicking off our parent engagement programming, and Sherwood has a long history of evolving and innovating to create more inclusive programming and services and parent workshops. And I love your dad's group. I did see it online. I love that idea. So as we close, what are other offerings that we can continue to grow to service autistic children, adults, and their families?
There's such a long list of just community inclusion, I think. And I think if someone would just go through and just take a survey and ask these parents, what's important to you? What would make you feel included? And that's just it within like literally cities should be like, what can we do to be more accommodating? You
Right.
know,
Ask the question.
ask
Ask the
questions.
question.
Ask questions, as opposed to assuming, like I said, that they need, they always say you need respite. Okay, but I always say if you get this information, you can have respite. Because if you come home from the spa day and there's still poop on the wall, you got to clean that, and all of that lovely manicure and everything is all messed up again.
Gone. It's gone.
It's all gone. So it's more important for you to have the information you need to be responsive to your loved one's needs, and it'll all work out. It will.
Yeah, we know information is power. And I often say, I mean, I even say to my team, if you're in a room making decisions about people and they are not there, that's probably the wrong decision, right? To your point of asking people what they need, not deciding what parents want or need, asking them. It's so simple, it's profound, quite frankly. And Camille, thank you for sharing your insights and experience with us. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, the only thing I would like to close with how I began this conversation is that people have to be accepting. I always say, be accepting of the child that God gave you. And I'm not
Mm.
even that religious, but if whatever you believe, be accepting of the child you received. Um, because that acceptance will carry them a long way, and it'll lead them to a lot of happiness if they know you accept.
Thank you, Camille. To learn more, visit sherwoodcenter.org to explore Sherwood Autism Center's programs and the colorofautism.org to discover the Color of Autism Foundation's impactful work.